What's up, everybody? The Soldier Barber Life here. So in this video, I wanted to introduce you guys to a new series that I wanted to start doing. This series is going to be called My Military Barber Story. And the purpose of this is to bring awareness to the community for all the barbers out there that are in the military. So prior service, and also those that are currently serving. That's what this will do. I'm going to be doing live streams on my YouTube channel where I will be interviewing various barbers and having them just share their story. So, with that being said, this will be episode 1 where I share my military barber story, how I became a barber in the military, and how I got to the present point right now. So, stay tuned. All right, so a little bit backstory. I've been a U.S. Army soldier since 2010. I joined the United States Army back in January of 2010, and I joined the Army as a 91 Alpha, which is a M1 Abrams tank system maintainer. So that's a big fancy name for saying that I'm a tank mechanic. So I joined back then, and I deployed. I've deployed to Iraq. I've been to various duty stations. I've gone to Fort Hood, Texas. I've been to Fort Benning, Georgia. I've been to Fort Stewart, Georgia, and I'm currently stationed in Fort Bliss, Texas. So my military barber story kind of really started in 2017. But prior to that, I did own a pair of clippers. So like I had some Andis T outliners, the corded version, and I would use those to just kind of clean myself up in between haircuts. This was back when I was going to a barber shop and actually getting my hair cut by a barber. I would use the T outliners just to kind of line myself up and keep myself groomed in between. Every now and then, sometimes some of my family would ask for a haircut and I would give them a haircut. But looking back, it was just really, really basic haircuts, maybe all even with the lineup, is pretty much what I was doing back then. I had two sons, and back when I was stationed at Fort Hood, I used to cut their hair, but like I say, these were like a low bald fade, um, all even most of the time. It wouldn't really even be faded. It would just be cut all to one length, pretty low, and then a lineup. And then some of my oldest son at the time, back when mohawks were really trending, he had asked me if I could cut his hair like that, and that was actually really challenging because going from doing that haircut to doing a mohawk was pretty challenging. So looking back on it, at that time he liked it, and at that time I thought it was good, but it was nothing that I really took seriously. And like I say, I had a pair of Walmart clippers, and then I had some Andis T outliners, and those were the tools that I were using. So just really like household tools, aside from the Andis T outliners that were more professional quality tools. So just doing that. Fast forward. In 2017, I was stationed in Fort Stewart, Georgia, and my unit was doing a training rotation to JRTC, which is the Joint Readiness Training Center. It's in Fort Polk, Louisiana. So my unit went down there, and we were doing a rotation. Usually you're gone for about 30 days, a month timeline that you're down there. And at that time, I was still, at that time, I started to cut my own hair. So that was something that I transitioned and started doing myself, where I was cutting my own hair at that time. So when I went down there to Fort Polk, Louisiana, I brought my clippers with me, and like I say, I had a some walls corded clippers that I got from Walmart, and then I had my Andis T outliners that I had, and then I want to say I had like some Walmart version of like some wall trimmers as well, just as a backup. And I brought those tools with me down there because I knew I was going to cut my own hair, and I had a self-cut system mirror, just a regular one that they had back then. So I brought that stuff down there with me, and I had cut my hair before I went down there. We did our 2 week training while we were in the box, and we came out of the box, and we were stationed. I mean, we were living in the little barracks area, and pretty much what had happened was I had cut my own hair, and a lot of my coworkers saw me get done with my own hair, and they came up to me afterwards, and they were like, "Yo, Sergeant Scranton, you think you could cut my hair as well?" And I was like, well, at that time, the only time I really had experience cutting was coarse hair. My hair is coarse hair. My two sons at the time, both of their hair was coarse hair. So like that was really the only experience I had. So, but I kind of knew a good amount of foundational fundamentals as far as like how to cut hair. So I figured it wouldn't be that hard. So some of these guys, I mean, we're talking all different hair textures, straight hair, coarse hair, and all different types of fades. Most people in the military will get like a medium skin fade. So that was the majority of the fades that I did do. So some of these guys start lining up, and here I am. I pulled out my tools, and I'm sitting there with my Walmart wall clippers and my Actice outliners, and I'm fading these guys up. And I knock one out, I knock two out. Next thing I know, I've got dang near my entire company that wants a haircut from me. So this is like, next thing I know, I've got like 25 people that want to get a haircut for me before we go back home. And we're doing like the little redeployment process where you're turning in your vehicles, you're doing maintenance on them, rail operations, and all that stuff. So in between doing all that, when I go back to the barracks at the end of the day, I'm cranking out these haircuts and I'm getting these guys in, and I start building that confidence where I was just like, man, this is pretty dope. Like I'm actually knocking these haircuts out, and the guys are actually liking it, you know. So for them, they were like, hey man, we got two options. We can either go to you and get a haircut, or we can go down to the PX. And I'm not really trying to take my chances with the PX because, you know, people that know who have been in the military know that sometimes the PX doesn't really give you the best quality haircuts. It's about quantity over quality, you know. So a lot of these guys said, I'd rather take a chance with you. And then when they start seeing some of the haircuts that were coming out, they were actually pretty happy with it. So every day, like after work, after we were doing what we had, the task that we had accomplished for that day, throughout the night until it was like 2200 when we had lights out, I'm cranking out haircuts and I'm knocking these out. Just, you know what I mean? Some of the guys are getting hyped, you know, they're really like, just really like boosting up my confidence in it. You know, some of them were a little bit more challenging than others. The biggest thing that I noticed though is that at that time my skill set wasn't really fully developed, so these haircuts were taking me quite a bit of time to knock out. You know, a haircut that now in my present state that would take me 30 minutes to knock out was taking me maybe 45, 50 minutes back then. So I couldn't really do a whole bunch of haircuts, but you know, the ones that I did do, you know, these guys were paying me for them as well. So I want to say I was charging, I think I was charging these guys at that time maybe like 20 bucks or so. So these guys were giving me 20 bucks for a cut. And then, you know, if I knocked out 5 cuts in that night, I just made 100 bucks, you know, from something that I wasn't doing before. So like doing that process and during that time that I was there, it kind of was like a light bulb moment that went off to me that made me realize like, hey, this is a good skill to have in the military because everybody in the military has to have a haircut. Those are the regulations that are in force, is that we must maintain good grooming appearance and have haircuts. So I was like, if most of my coworkers that I work around have to get a haircut and I know how to cut hair, I can always be that convenience factor for them, or I can always be that person that they can go to benefit from that to get a haircut. So I really, like, once I had that epiphany moment, I really decided like, hey, this is something that I think I want to continue to do. So after we got back home, I actually went to the store and actually I know I ordered it online. So then that's when I started thinking like maybe I want to start doing this some more because some of these guys that came to me that I cut their hair in JRTC, they were like, hey, in 2 weeks, Iron Scranton, can I get a cut from you again? And I was like, sure. So like I had an area in my house that I was in when I was there in Fort Stewart, Georgia. It was an area where I had my fish tank set up. And I pretty much was like, all right, you know, I pretty much like went on Facebook Market. I bought a barber chair. I went online from the money that I made down there and I bought me some actual professional quality tools. So from there, I remember my first clipper that I bought that was a professional one was the magic clip. So it was the wall cordless magic clip. And then later on down the line, I got the corded wall seniors. So I had pretty much in my stock, I started out with the magic clip, a I had a cordless magic clip, a corded senior, and an Actice outliner were the three tools that I was using. And I kind of reinvested some of that money that I was making into my in-home barbershop that I had. So some of these soldiers were coming through, but the area that I lived in was about 30 minutes away from the base. So a lot of the soldiers did live in another area called Hinesville. So during that time too, I really started looking into social media And that's when I created a barber page, and that barber page was called Light Bright Cuts because that was the nickname that one of the guys gave me in JRTC. And the reference from that is me being light skinned. They nicknamed me Light Bright, and I was doing haircuts. So that was the name that just stuck, and that was the name I went with. So my barbershop name was Light Bright Cuts, and I was doing that, and I was sitting there, I was cutting these guys up, but then some of the clients didn't want to make that travel. So at this time, like I was in hustle mode, grind mode, really grinding it out, all about building clientele as much as possible. So I was doing house calls as well. So I was driving 30 minutes to Hinesville, and I would go cut, but I would do it in a way to where it would be beneficial for me. So I would go schedule and set up and maybe like have like 4 or 5 cuts that I would drive down there on the weekend. Or if I got off of work on a Friday and it was early, I would sit up there and after work go cut these guys' hair. So like in the beginning, the convenience definitely wasn't for me. It was in the client's favor, but at that time I was in that building clientele phase where my prices weren't as high. They were below market rate because my skill set was a little bit below market rate. And also the demand for me wasn't high enough for me to really be having all the clients come to me. So I was doing a lot of house calls, and then I started getting on social media and really marketing myself on social media. I created me a Instagram page, a TikTok, and then Facebook as well. So I created a Facebook business page for my barber business, and I would join a lot of the community groups in my community, and I would market myself on there. So the haircuts that I would do, I would market myself. So I actually started reaching more people by doing that. So then my clientele just became not only military based, but then it was also civilians mixed in there as well. So then I started getting civilian clients that would come to me. I had military clients, and then I started kind of getting this reoccurring clients that started coming back to me because they really enjoyed what I offered. It was just so much more than a haircut. For me, like I really take pride in providing the overall experience and also having outstanding customer service. Before I joined the military, I received Customer Service Excellence Award when I was working in the hospitality industry, and that really carried over to me being a barber. And this really took me a long way to where I started getting good client retention. And there was even times where I used to pull up to the barracks on base, and I would go there on like a Saturday night, and I would set up by the CQ desk, and I would set up my little shop with my mobile barber bag, and just guys would just come through. I mean, there was nights where it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. I was doing cut still, but in the beginning, you have to do that. You have to have that grind mentality. You have to be able to grind it out. And in the beginning, the convenience isn't in your favor until you get that demand for you. Until that supply and demand goes, the convenience is in the best interest of the clients. So I was doing things for their convenience that was inconveniencing me. So I was going to the barracks, I was doing house calls, I was charging lower prices until I got to that point to where my clientele was adequate enough to where the demand was for me, where people started coming to me in my location, where it was convenient for me and comfortable for me to just open up shop and cut hair. So then, like I say, that all happened in 2017, and then I pretty much just stuck with it, and that became like a side job that I did, a part-time job that I did outside of the military. Now, I wasn't fully booked at this point. I still had my repeat clients. I had people that I was doing house calls with, going and doing all that. I was still pulling up to the barracks, so I was making a decent amount of money on the side. And like I say, I was still at that price point where I was charging about like 20 dollars for a haircut. And when I would go do these house calls, I would pretty much just charge them whatever the cost would be for travel expenses. So whatever, how much it costs in gas for a round trip would be the additional fee that I would do that. But a lot of the guys that I would do the house calls for would tip me really good. So, shout out to them. That made it a lot more easier and convenient for me. But that's pretty much where the grind was. That's kind of like where it started. And I did that for a couple years, and I kind of just would at that time would reinvest the money that I had back into my barber business. So then that's when I would start buying better quality tools, going from my clients sitting in a bar stool to sitting in an actual like entry level barber chair, just kind of buying little things here and there, reinvesting that. And I did that for a couple years, and then fast forward to 2020, my unit, this was during like right in the beginning of the pandemic. So In the beginning of the year of 2020, my unit was deploying to Europe. We were doing a 9 month training rotation to Europe, and we went to Poland for 6 months and Lithuania for 3 months. So for me, I knew like, man, this is going to be big for me because me being a barber over there and with all this COVID stuff like popping off, like we were pretty much on lockdown on the camp that we were on the whole time. And over there in Europe, their regulations for barbers and stuff like that was even crazier. So the camp I was on was a really small camp, and this camp didn't even have a barber shop on it. So the only way that you could get a haircut was by other soldiers who knew how to cut hair. So like I pretty much had a monopoly going on to where when I showed up, I had a line of people that wanted to get a haircut. It was so many people with overgrown hair because the pandemic kicked off. We were on lockdown on the camp, and military barbers were the only ones that could cut hair, that could provide that service for them. So, of course, we had to stick to whatever regulations it was, wearing masks, sanitation, all that stuff like that. So that was of utmost importance. So we were doing that whole process, and during that whole time, I go through this deployment, and I actually, my command liked what I was doing so much, they gave me kind of like my own area in the tents that we were living in. So we had tents, and I had a table set up. I had all my stuff there. And this was during the time too where I was still reinvesting money. So I remember at that time that was when the Babyliss FX series came out. And then I just started having this like love and obsession with like gold tools. So I saw the Babyliss Gold FX triple combo come out, and around that time it was my birthday. So that was like my birthday gift to myself, from some of the money I had been making from cutting hair, and I bought the Babyliss FX series. And when I got those, I was just like, man, these things are dope. These are the best things ever. Clients would see them and they'd be like, oh man, you got gold clippers, bro. Like you on another level. So like, it was just an all factor. And then there was other services that I was doing. So not only was I doing haircuts, but I was sitting up there doing black mask, for guys. I was doing like hot towel, for other people. So it was like a full scale services that I was trying to really tap into, because at this point I had refined my skill set to where I could get the haircuts done in a decent amount of time. So I really wanted to broaden my horizons. And with the soldiers going through this time where we were going through COVID-19 epidemic that was going on, a haircut was one of the things for them that could really change their morale. So these guys getting a haircut from me or from any other military barbers that we had really boost their morale and gave them a sense of normalcy during these hard times that we were going through, because we still had to do all the training and everything that we had to do while we were over there, but we weren't allowed to go off base. We weren't allowed to really do the normal things that you would do while you're on one of these rotations or deployments. So, a haircut was a big deal for these guys. So I remember I had waiting lists where I had on a piece of paper, and I'd sit up there and I'd have a waiting list. And this waiting list every day would have 10 people on it. So, like, I would go to work throughout the day. I would usually get off of work around like 1700, and I'd go eat dinner. So I'd start cutting at 1800, and then I'd cut all the way until 2200. So I was cranking that out, and I was doing this in the beginning 7 days a week, and on the days that we got off, we were getting one day off a week on Sundays. I would cut all day, and it seemed like I would never catch up because my waiting list just continued to grow. I would look on my list and it'd be 25 soldiers on there just waiting to get a haircut, and I'd be trying to knock them out. And by the time I would get through this list, I would turn around, and then the guys that I just cut a couple of weeks ago are ready to get another cut. So then it was just never ending, and it got to the point to where I offered another incentive where I told these guys, you can skip the line if you pay double. That backfired on me, honestly, because for some of these guys, they weren't spending their money nowhere else. So they were like, shoot, you're charging $25 for a haircut, and if I skip the line and I don't have to wait for these next 10, 15, 20 guys in line, I pay you $50 and I get cut right now. I started getting a line for people that were skipping the line. So then now it was just like, man, I couldn't keep up with it. But, I was really enjoying it because at this time I had got promoted to sergeant first class. So I was getting sergeant first class active duty pay. And then outside of my normal work hours, I was doing haircuts. So nonstop, I was sitting there just cutting heads. And then I was just like, man, I am making a lot of extra money on the side from this. And it was dope. It was awesome. Like how much money I was making from this, so then it just made me even more like excited about the industry and about everything that I had going on, because I was like, this is such a great asset and such a great skill set to have in the military, to where I started also encouraging other guys to do it just to help me out as well. Because, our unit having 750 people in it, I can't cut everybody. So then I was actually encouraging other people to cut hair as well. So then there became other barbers that kind of surfaced up, and then it was different skill sets. Kind of, not trying to toot my own horn, but everybody knew like when it came to cutting hair, I was like the GOAT in the unit. So like I was the best one, and I was cutting actually the higher ranking people as well. So my battalion commander, I was cutting him. My operations sergeant major, I was cutting him as well. So I'm cutting the higher ups in the unit, my first sergeant, my commanders, stuff like this. And then I'm also cutting the soldiers and all that through this whole process. So like people were coming to me, and I had my price point that I was sitting at, which was $25. There were other guys that were at lower skill sets that maybe were charging $15, 10, $15. Some of them, as they started getting better, went up to like 20. But for me, like I had the highest price point, and I offered multiple different services for these guys as well. So they definitely enjoyed that, and I kept having a bunch of these guys coming back to me. So that whole time while we were there, we moved to another camp, and in that area, we went from staying inside tents to staying inside barracks. So when we moved inside the barracks, there was an empty laundry room in there with no washers or dryers. It was just one empty room with the barracks that we were in. And I asked my command, like, hey, do you guys mind, if I set up a barbershop in here, because, and at that time they were really with it, because they saw a barbershop as a community place to boost morale for all the soldiers, during the times that we were going through. So I actually acquired some barber chairs that were left there from previously when they had a barber contractor that came on the camp to cut hair, but because of COVID, he was no longer there. So I wind up getting like 3 barber chairs, and these were good quality barber chairs. These were the artist hands, like black barber chairs. And I set up this whole barber shop in the barracks in the laundry room. I had my station that was in there. I had 3 other stations for 3 other barbers that were in there. And then I also wanted to do something for the female soldiers as well to accommodate them. So one of the soldiers in my unit, she did facials, and she did like certain services that catered to women. So I set her up with a station in there as well, and she was doing facials, she was doing nails, she was doing all kind of stuff for these women. So like this one hub that I set up was just the spot to be in. Like people would come in there and hang out, people would come in there, chop it up, they get a haircut, and I pretty much set it up as an entire barbershop. So I'm running this business within these barracks that we have, and all the soldiers' morale was just like boosted for it. My chain of command loved it because they loved the concept of it, and it was great. So other units were on the camp with us as well. They started coming over, so then word spread to them. So it's just nonstop, to where people knew like I was the GOAT when it came to cutting. So like my books were full every single day. Like every single day I was fully booked out for the duration of the deployment. And then we went from Poland to Lithuania, the same thing. We had CHUs, which were container housing units, which is like a connex that they convert to a room. And I had a room that I was by myself. So the other half of the room where I would have a roommate, I set up my barbershop area, and it was the same thing. I was cutting there and providing haircuts for all the soldiers that we had there during the rest of that year. So then over the course of that deployment, I made $25,000 at $25 haircuts. And this is $25,000 from barbering. This isn't $25,000 with my military pay. So at that time, I had Sergeant First Class pay that I was getting, active duty Sergeant First Class pay. And then I made an additional $25,000 from barbering. So that moment was just like boom for me. I was like, this is where it's at. Like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to keep doing. So like once I got back to the States and I went back to Fort Stewart, Georgia, my supply and demand was through the roof. All these clients that I was cutting over there became returning clients for me. So for me, I used a good amount of that money that I had, and I converted the little barbershop that I had in my house, and I made it a full on scale barbershop. I bought a barber station. I bought a $1,500 barber chair. All my tools that I had, I got all professional tools, and I got them all cordless as well, because that was during the time where tools were transitioning from corded to cordless. So all my tools were cordless. I also, that was during the time to where I found out about online booking apps. So then that's when I got a Booksy account, and I created a Booksy account. I went on there. I made my full portfolio on there. I put my pictures on there. I put my different services that I was offering. So I went on there, did all that. So then now I was really a lot more marketable. So now I'm marketing myself on Booksy. I'm marketing myself on social media. I had kind of built up my social media page a little bit, to the point to where I kind of is getting a little bit more notoriety in the area. Um, I had those clients that I had before. Some of them started coming back. I'm starting to get new clients. So now here I am. When I come back at the end of the year in 2020, I have a full clientele. But at this time, you got to think COVID was still going on. So there were still some barbershops that were closed during this time. So I was in a sticky situation where I was like, do I continue to keep cutting, or like what am I going to do? So like there was a little phase where I just reinvested the money into my barbershop, and I kind of waited it out really. And I had it set up, and I was cutting my own hair. I was cutting my son's hair at that time. And then at that time, I think I was just cutting some coworkers and stuff like that. Because at that time we all had to get like mandatory vaccinated and all that stuff. So like we were pretty good when it came to that. So I got to the time to where kind of COVID started going away, and the regulations that they had kind of were more lax. Now, COVID was still a thing, but the regulations that it had were kind of going away. So then you could go out more now. You just had to be wear a mask and stuff like that. So then I reopened my barbershop to the public, kind of, and really started marketing myself. And what had happened was I was surprised with the influx that I was getting of civilian clientele as well. And the reason why I was getting that, because I was in my home cutting, it was a one-on-one interaction, to where people were still kind of nervous about going into a traditional barbershop and getting a haircut with a group of people. They felt like it gave them more risk or more exposure. So for me, them being able to just come to me directly and they only have to interact with one person felt like a safer option for them, especially for the people that had kids. I had one of my clients that actually had like a immune deficiency kind of disease, so his mom definitely preferred to come to me. Like I say, I was always on top of everything with sanitation, cleanliness. I was vaccinated at that time, and I would keep my tools clean. I would keep my area clean. And then, they just really appreciated that one-on-one interaction that they would get. So like at that present moment, it's 2021, and it's my books just started to be booming. I had the repeat soldiers that I was cutting them, and it got to the point to where I pretty much was booked out, because I would work my military schedule Monday through Friday, and then on Saturday and Sunday I would cut. So I opened up my books, and every time that I had my books open, I was fully booked out. So when you would look at my schedule, it was fully booked out, to the point to where my supply and demand really got to that point to where I could start to consider a price increase. So I want to say it was when 2021 came around, I had announced that I was going to be raising my prices up a little bit. Now, when I did this, I did it strategically. What you got to realize is what everybody talks about is supply and demand. I was at a pretty much 95 to 100% uh, occupancy rate when it came to being booked out. So the supply and demand was there. So what that was to me is that I have too many clients and I can't accommodate all of them. There were people that wanted to really get a cut and I couldn't squeeze them in. So then that let me know that, hey, maybe it's time for me to raise my prices. So at that time, I was charging $25. And I want to say I just went up like another five. I think I went up to like $5 more. So I went from my basic service that I had of I went up and took that to $30. So I started charging $30, and then if somebody wanted a premium haircut, it was $35, and then I offered different higher level services as well. So If somebody wanted to get like a waiver special where I did all type of stuff, lay their waves down, brush session, all that stuff, I want to say I charged like 40 for that. And then that's when I really started doing other services as well, like facials. So if somebody wanted like a VIP service where they get a facial, they get a haircut, I think I charged like 50 or $60 for that service as well. But even with that price increase, my supply and demand was still there. I was still booked out. I did lose a couple clients, which is normal, but the clients that I did lose were guys that were only rocking with me because of my low price point. You know what I mean? I was affordable to them. So when I did raise my price, I guess that little bit of price raise was enough for them, but it worked out because it actually opened the door for me for other clients that were looking or valuing my services that I offered, and they didn't mind paying the price point that I had. Like I say, I still at that time I was like on average with what market rate was for being a barber. So that pretty much the duration of the time that I was there in Fort Stewart, Georgia. I was completely booked out when it came to clients. So in January of 2022, pretty much with the new year coming around, I had this idea that I wanted to change the direction of my social media platforms that I had, because before my social media platform was a barber page, and the only thing I posted on there were pretty much haircuts. So only thing that was on my page, that was the whole intent of it, was posting my work, posting my portfolio, and that did get me a decent amount of followers, but I really was below like 1,000 followers. The only people that really were following me were potential clients and people that were in the local community. So I had an idea because I wanted to really scale my social media presence beyond just the local community and just beyond a portfolio. So that's when I came up with the concept of changing my Instagram and all my social media pages from light bright cuts, and I switched it over and I came up with the concept of the soldier barber life. And that's when that was invented. And the whole purpose of that was the soldier barber life was more of a brand for my platform to work through. So then it was real a lot more diverse. So it just wasn't a portfolio anymore, but then it was more focused on creating content specific to my niche. So my niche being that I was a barber and I'm in the military, I used those two and I joined those two niches together, and that became the direction that I did with my content. So then I really redirected my content, and then I had my first viral video after I started doing that. I became a lot more consistent. And one thing about me, like I have a good sense of humor, so a lot of times I can provide funny content. So I started making all this different type of content and stuff for barbers to relate to, for all different type of stuff, and it started getting recognition. I had my first viral video that did like 9.8 million views on Instagram, and it blew my page up. And then I just consistently kept doing that, and I really did that with my with that page, with my TikTok. I created a YouTube channel, and then I was doing long form content on the YouTube channel, and then I'm doing short form content on my Instagram and my TikTok. I'm still marketing myself on Facebook with a business page. And then I really just did all that, and I had that whole process going. So then the social media actually worked better for me doing it in that direction, because the amount of exposure that you get for a video. If I was just posting my portfolio, other people see that, but my total engagement would be really low. But when I made the Soldier Barber Life and switched the direction of my content, I started getting a lot more viral videos that started happening. And how that turned into clientele for me was that viral video that I had would reach more people. So whereas I was getting maybe tops a couple hundred views per video, now I'm starting to get thousands of views. Thousands of people are starting to see my videos. Tens of thousands are starting to see my videos. Even the viral ones that are hitting 100,000 to 1 million, I'm starting to get viral content, and I'm starting to be recognized more in the holistic barber community and my local community. And that exposure made my presence grow a lot more. So at this time, I was still fully booked, but then now I'm also getting more new clients through social media. So that was during that whole time that I was there at Fort Stewart, Georgia. in 2022, all the way up until the summertime of 2022 when it was time for me to PCS. My oldest son had graduated at this time. We were taking him down to Florida, where he was going to be starting school in Orlando. So I dropped my son off down in Orlando, Florida, and then I made my way across country to Fort Bliss, Texas. Really long drive. I PCS there. So that was a little bit of a challenge because now I'm going from being fully booked to relocating to a new city. And now I have to rebuild and start my clientele all over again. But the key thing about that is I knew all the tools and skills of how to build clientele. I went through that trial and error phase while I was in Georgia. So all I had to do was just replicate that once I got to El Paso. So once I got to El Paso, I bought a house. And one of the big factors for the house that I wanted is I wanted a very similar setup to the house that I had in Georgia, where I could have a barber room in it and it's right off of the entry door. So I did that and I wind up finding a house as well in the area we wanted to live in the school system that my oldest daughter was going to be going to school in. I found the perfect house. And when I did that, I set up all my barber area inside the house as well. And I went back on Booksy. I activated my Booksy and I started marketing myself again. So here we are. It is like towards the end of the summer of 2022, and I'm starting from square one again. So the good thing is that my social media presence carried over. So there were people that were expecting me there, or there were people that knew who I was at Fort Bliss from my content that I created that had reached across multiple echelons. So that carried forward. And then once I got into work, it was the same thing. I marketed myself as well, where I would tell people, hey, I'm a barber. I created new business cards. And then I created posters. So it was different ways that I went about marketing myself. I went to the reception center where all the soldiers in process to Fort Bliss. I put business cards there. I would drop some of those off. So I started gaining clientele that way. And a couple months later, my unit went on a training rotation to Fort Irwin, California, to the National Training Center. So I brought all my barber equipment there because I knew in the previous times that I've done these training rotations, this is a lot of time that I can really make some augmentation like money, um, because I'm providing the service there and people really enjoy that. So I brought my stuff with me. We did the whole training. We went in the box for 2 weeks. We came out of the box. And when we were doing our regeneration phase, after I got done doing my work for the day, I would go back to the bay. I set up an area where I was cutting hair. So I was cutting all these guys' hair, had a long list. I was working through it, and I made a decent amount of money that I had there. When I got back to Fort Bliss, I noticed that my tempo here was a little bit higher. So I really had to augment, kind of like figure out what way is going to work best for me for gaining clientele and retaining clientele, because that's the biggest thing. And the challenges I was having is that I was able to get clientele, but due to the high paced training cycle, it was hard for me to retain some of those people, especially the civilian ones that really didn't understand military life and the training that we were doing. So I would gain new clients throughout the end of 2022. I was gaining new clients, but then, come January rolls around. I had to do another rotation to where my unit was assigned to go to back to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and I did a 1 month rotation there in Joint Readiness Center in Fort Polk, Louisiana. I took my stuff with me there as well, and I did the same process. I took all my stuff there. I cut a bunch of guys there, made some extra money while I was there, but then when I got back, the tempo of my job was very demanding, so it was a lot harder for me to maintain a steady clientele, especially with the training cycle that we were on. So a few months went by. It was 2023, and I was continuing to cut. I had my barber studio set up at the house. Everything was good. One thing, another side note, is that the overall barber scene in El Paso was a lot bigger. So when I was at Fort Stewart, Georgia, the area next to the base was a lot smaller. It wasn't as large of a city as when I moved to Fort Bliss. So Fort Bliss is a really large city. Outside of Fort Bliss itself, you have El Paso, and that city is large. And the barber scene in El Paso is a lot more competitive as well. There's a lot of barbers out here, and there's a lot of them that are doing their thing. So it made it a lot more competitive, but I still was able to make a name for myself in the market because I knew the specific skill set and everything that I provided as a barber. So people really appreciated the fact too, with El Paso being a predominantly Hispanic place, that me really knowing how to be really good at cutting coarse hair, I noticed that that became a lot of my clientele that I started to develop was people that wanted to come to me for that reason. But then everything else that I had before, my punctuality, my professionalism, my sanitation as far as cleanliness and everything like that, those are things that really stood out more than just providing a good haircut. So when I would look at my reviews on Booksy, people really spoke about those kind of things, and then all the different extra services that I offered, and at that time when I moved to El Paso, I decided to raise my price point to where I have it currently, where I charge $40 for a premium haircut, and then my services go up higher than that. If somebody wants a waiver service, that's $50. A VIP service is $75, and I offer an executive service for $100. And then little add-ons as well. If somebody wants to add a beard, I charge 10 for that. Eyebrows, I charge 10 for that. So that marketplace that I was pretty common with what the normal price is, because in El Paso, Texas, the average price of a haircut is anywhere from $30 to $40 is the average price. Now, of course, you got some that are higher than that and some that are lower. But when I came in, I wanted to be right in that median range of what the average marketplace was. So that's where I set my price point. And I definitely did see a better quality clientele that I have, especially with the side of town that I live on. It's a more higher end side of town. So the customers and the clients that I had were a different type of clientele as well. Some that didn't mind paying a little bit extra money for a higher quality service. So I continue to cut hair, doing that in my barber studio outside of my very rigorous training schedule that we were doing. And then fast forward to there, the summertime of 2023 is when my unit was doing another deployment. So this unit was doing a rotation to Europe, and this time we were going to Germany. So I knew from back in 2020, I was like, it's going down again. Like it's really going down. So I did everything that I always do. I get all my barber supplies. I pack all my stuff. I throw them in tough boxes. I throw all that stuff in the Connex, and I ship it off over there. So all the supplies and stuff that I need, I bought all that in advance. I put it on in the Connexes, and it was sitting there waiting on me. And then I hand carried all my tools with me. So I had my mobile barber bag. So I kept the essential stuff that I needed, and I kept all those barber tools with me, and I carried that stuff onto the plane with me, and I knew it was going down. So as soon as we got there to Germany, it was the same thing. We did have a pretty intense training cycle that we were doing there as far as the work that we were doing training Ukrainians. But outside of that, the same thing inside the barracks. My unit let me set up a barber shop inside the barracks, and I set up the full barber shop. I had a barber chair, I had all my tools, I had ring lights, full scale barber shop. And I pretty much had two price points that I charged. I charged $30 for a regular cut, which was just a quick cut, somebody that just wanted something simple, get in, get out. I would usually get done with that in like 30 minutes. And then I charged 45, I mean not 40, I charged $40 for a premium haircut. And that was a haircut that included like enhancements, razor finish, really detailed, style the hair, and all that. So I had $30 and $40, and then I had a little whiteboard set up, and I would write down the time slots that I knew I would be getting off at the end of the day. So I would usually be getting off work every day around 1700. And what I would do is I would set my time schedules up like the same thing I did before, from 1800 up until 2200 is when I had everything shut down because we had lights out in the barracks. So I was cutting, and on average, I was doing 5 clients a night. So Monday through Friday, I was doing 5 clients. Saturday, I would do 10 clients, and then Sunday I would take off completely, because I was a little bit older now, so it was a little bit more taxing on my body to be able to cut 7 days a week. So I definitely didn't want to do that. I wanted to give myself a day of rest so I can kind of reset from my military duties and also from my barber duties, and then get back after it with the week. So during that time, I'd say about 75% of the time I was fully booked out while I was over here. It was the same thing. Everybody knew in the unit that I was the GOAT when it came to the barber. I had a full dope barber setup. The services I was providing, I was just cranking them out. And there was other units that were on the camp with us there in Germany. So they were coming to me. And I was doing the same thing, marketing myself on social media in the local area as well. So I was doing that. People would find me on social media. People would find out about me versus word of mouth. They'd be walking around the base and they'd be like, "Hey man, who cut your hair?" They'd give them my information. So word of mouth, everything was spreading. So throughout that whole duration of that 9 months that I was over there, I was charging a higher price point. And I did take some time off, so this time it wasn't the pandemic going on, so we were actually able to go off post and explore. So this time I was actually able to go off and explore Europe, so I utilized that time as well. I did put in a couple passes and I did go out and explore Europe. That was one of the great benefits of being in the military and being on a deployment, doing that rotation to a European country, is being able to see the European culture and experience it. So I was doing less haircuts, charging a higher price, but I wind up at the end of deployment making more money than I did back in 2020. And I want to say, I think like at the end of it, I made approximately like $30,000 probably from this deployment, and that was great. That helped out a lot financially, and it was awesome. So when I got back stateside, the same thing. What the dope thing about it is I had found out that my wife had actually surprised me, because when I came back, I still had the same barber equipment that I had from when I was in Georgia. It was all pretty good equipment, but she surprised me and she redid my barber studio for me completely. So she bought me one of the new toolbox barber stations, a new mirror, new little shelves on the wall. She bought me a new couch, new stand, all that kind of stuff. So she completely renovated my barber studio for me and surprised me while I was gone, and did that for me. So that was like hecka dope. So then my barber studio got even to a higher level to where it looked even more professional. And then I went and I purchased some the hexagon lights. I installed those up in the ceiling as well. So it really took my barber studio to a professional, really high end looking barber studio. And then, from there, I got back on Booksy. I restarted remarketing myself. A lot of those clients that I cut over the course of the deployment, they became new clients of mine. And, I pretty much was rebuilding my clientele. So from that moment up until present day, that's pretty much where I'm at, where I am here in El Paso, Texas, stationed at Fort Bliss, Texas. And I pretty much on the weekends, that's when I cut. So that's what I've been doing since I've been here. I have my normal duties that I do Monday through Friday, and I actually got moved up to a different position that I'm doing now, which gives me a little bit more flexibility in my schedule. So it's not as intense and not as stressful in the job that I'm doing now as the job that I had previously. So it gives me a lot more flexibility and predictability in my free time. So that's helping me out when it comes to the barbering, because now I have more free time to do stuff for barbering. So now, like, pretty much what I do as well is I take my mobile barber bag with me to work. And Monday through Friday, if anybody needs a cut, I will cut people's hair on lunchtime as well, just for convenience. And I've also been reached out due to my social media. There's National Guard units that do mobilization and demobilization that come through Fort Bliss as the hub for them to do that. And a lot of these guys have found me on social media, and they will hit me up and be like, hey, what do I got to do to get a cut? And I tell them, like, hey, if you can get like a couple guys together, maybe 3 or 4 guys, I'll pull up on you guys to you guys' barracks and I'll cut you guys. And I've done that a couple times. So my social media has really driven traffic to me. There's guys at work, so I'll cut guys at lunchtime. Some of my coworkers, I have guys that I'll maybe go over to cut their hair that are rotational people that are coming through Fort Bliss, and I have my barber studio set up at the house. And right now, I'm not back at that point to where I am fully booked, but I am trending in the right direction. So I am trending upward, especially being that I just came back from a deployment. It's going to be a while before we do another deployment. So now I have more consistency being stateside for clients and having them being able to come back. So that's pretty much where we are present day. It has been 7 years now that I've been in the game, since 2017, that I have been a barber, and it's been great. It was one of the best decisions that I could have made as an active duty soldier, is learning how to be a barber. And it's been nothing but a blessing to me. It has provided way better financial opportunities for me and my family. The supplemental income that I do have a really large family. It's my wife, myself, and I have 6 children. So like that gets really expensive. So having this supplemental income for me is very beneficial, and it has been a blessing. It has been one of the best decisions that I made. And I love it so much that once I transition out of the military, that is the industry that I actually want to stay in. So I don't know if I'm going to necessarily be behind the chair, but I definitely want to go into shop ownership because I feel like I'll have that experience, and the military experience I have in a managerial position. I feel like I can really do great at leading people and mentoring people to get them to be great barbers as well. So if you have stuck with me through this whole video, I really appreciate it. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. This is episode 1 of My Military Barber Story, and there will be plenty more of these. Like I say, I'm going to be interviewing different barbers that are in the military across the industry, and we're going to do a live stream with them, and they're going to share their story with you just like I did. If this has inspired you in any way, please drop a comment down below. Share this video to somebody else if you think it may be inspiring to them as well. And if you have any questions, if you're considering being a barber as well while being in the military, I'm telling you, go for it. DM me on Instagram if you have any questions. I'm always mentoring other people, always helping them out. I'm here for the community, and I'm trying to make this grow. Like I say, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you. Till next time, the Soldier Barber Life out.